Hello, friends. If I can invite you all to come find a seat, and feel free to, we are not shy about eating or drinking in this sacred space. We value bodies and we value nourishment, so please make sure you grab a cup of coffee or some food and some nashi type stuff. My name is Robert English, for those who may not know me. I serve as a lead pastor here at Clifton United Methodist Church, and we're a progressive LGBTQ plus affirming faith community in this diverse, wondrous context that we call Clifton. And we're so honored to have this day a panel who's going to be talking about the history of LGBTQ plus persons here in the city of Cincinnati. And this is a co-sponsored event with the Ohio Lesbian Archive. And up until very recently, the archive was hosted here at Clifton for many, many years. How long? 17 years. We had the blessing of hosting the archive. And we are really sad that we can't host anymore, but it's for a really great reason. They just outgrew our space. The archive has just continued to expand and to grow, and it became apparent that that in order to fulfill the mission, the vision that they're carrying, they needed a bigger space. And so we sent them forth sad, but also excited, because y'all found a big space, and you found a wonderful space, and now you've been in your space now for August. Yeah, so just a couple of months. So really, really glad that you all are here. Enjoy and learn and listen and continue to work and advocate for justice for all persons, especially queer folks in our city. Oh, and I'm going to introduce Vic, who is a really wonderful friend of mine, who we got to know each other because of this partnership. So I'm going to hand this over to Vic.
Oh, we get to use a mic?
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah. We're very official here.
All right. Phoebe and I would like to, and the rest of the archives, we're all on the archives board. We're on the archives board. So we'd like to present you with this thank you letter and a check. Just a little something extra.
Thank you.
But a fantastic thank you letter. And they insisted I go first. And so I'd like to introduce you, though. My name is Vic, and this is Michael Chanak, and Phebe Beiser, the other co-founder, along with me. And Scott Knox, who's also on the board. All four of us are. And it's a board that reflects more our inclusion policy, which has always been there, but which is more in your face now. But anyway, so I'll go first. Gosh, I don't know if I can do this and flip the page and do the mic. Hold the mic for me. Okay. Hi, again. I'm Victoria Ramstetter, co-founder of the Ohio Lesbian Archives and one of Cincinnati's homegrown lesbians. I was born at Good Sam in '53, raised Catholic on the West Side. All my secrets. When I was growing up and falling in love with other girls, being gay was still considered the quote-unquote love that dares not speak its name. I fell head over heels for another 16-year-old girl at Seton, and that was the beginning for me of both gay liberation and the Ohio Lesbian Archives. First, I had to examine the dreams I had about tea. It didn't take long to realize that my world was truly rocked. I must be a queer, I told myself, but I don't want to cut my hair short, dress like a man, smoke a cigar, and drive a truck. My mother had shared her only knowledge of homosexuals when she told me about her cousin, who had been a butch in the 50s and an unspeakable embarrassment to the family. Meanwhile, at 17, I had learned that my softball coach was rumored to be queer, and I must have been sending out my own vibes because we ended up lovers. She introduced me to countless lesbian ball players, and in a way, the rest was also history. Gay history where being gay was still a big secret for every one of us to keep. Sorry. But as my coach girlfriend told me, in Chicago, you can walk down the street holding hands. She and other women she knew had seen and done this in Chicago, someplace like Oz, where people were free to be themselves and not hide their love. I met a real kindred spirit when I was just 18, an intellectual boy who was attracted to other boys and had grown up Protestant in Riverside, close to my mostly Catholic suburb of St. Amsville. Still best friends all these years later, we quickly ended up meeting other intellectual gay people through Barb, our older hippie friend, who was evidently some sort of magnet for gay men. But by the time I started at UC, there were lots of gay guys who wanted to be free, and we all helped form a gay lib group I'm pretty sure we called the Cincinnati Gay Alliance. We segued into forming a group on campus called the UC Gay Society. This made me very happy. I did not want to hide my lifestyle, doomed to a melodramatic life in the fields of ball games and love affairs with no anchors, such as the hope of marriage or freedom to provide some rich soil within our families and society that would allow our love to really blossom. Before Gay Lib, many gay people succumbed to alcoholism, worked jobs that had no futures, and lived lives of quiet desperation, condemned to dark bars. Gay Lib changed all that, and by the time I was 19, and marched in the first Cincinnati Gay Pride Parade, a small band of peaceful warriors quietly announcing that yes, the time had come and we would be free. The revolution was clearly a spiritual fire spreading across the country, fought in the courts by new activist groups to challenge the laws and customs, to finally secure equal rights for all gay people. We also got stronger and were able to challenge the false beliefs embedded in our culture, both in our families and communities. We did not ask permission and we did not attempt violent coups, but we stood fast to be simply seen as equal to all humans, accepted and embraced, no longer widely shunned and rejected by the majority of our society. Gay books were published like candy, sprinkled all over the country, and gradually became available through traveling bookstores, and then finally in Cincinnati, gay bookstores and Crazy Ladies. I continued to collect magazines, journals, organizational ephemera, books, posters, etc. that document our movement. When I met Phebe, who also was saving the history of lesbians and gay lib, we were thrilled to meet another kindred spirit. After we learned about the Lesbian History Archives in New York, we knew we needed such a repository for everything we had been saving and made plans to eventually open an archives in Cincinnati. Phebe got that project off the ground with the help of other Cincinnati lesbians. I was still living in Florida and sending her boxes of treasures after her home was established for the Ohio Lesbian Archives in the Cincinnati Women's Building, which was also home for the Crazy Ladies bookstore. With the establishment of the Ohio Lesbian Archives, we made sure that our history would be preserved so that future generations would know all about the struggles and victories that had come before. Meanwhile, the quest for true liberation of all gay people was still front and center. And yes, against all odds, our intimate relationships were finally acknowledged by the legalization of gay marriages, as well as other changes to the laws of our country. Legal protection that had been denied us, and frankly, never really considered necessary to the larger heterosexual population. So for me, the transformation in gay lives from the time I first realized I loved another girl to today was fast and amazing when compared to what had been taken for granted for so long by both heterosexuals and gay people. Our souls were set free and our capacity to love was empowered and transformed by gay liberation. The current backlash to these laws is disturbing and infuriating. Sorry, you guys. We worked so hard and so long for the rights that had been denied us. It seems impossible to return to the past where gay people were kept afraid, unhappy, and too often destroyed by the destroyed by the hatred of our society. We must continue to stand firm again with our hard-earned rights secured now and for the future. So you see, there will always be a need for gay liberation in this world. And I believe there will always be archives devoted to preserving all aspects of our lives. Lastly, I want to thank the community of the Clifton United Methodist Church for granting sanctuary to the Ohio Lesbian Archives for 17 years. We always felt welcomed and blessed by the generosity of your congregation. You have all contributed to the preservation of gay and lesbian history, and again, thank you.
That was wonderful.
Oh, thank you. Do you want to go next? Just go
Sure,
ahead.
why not?
Okay.
I listened to you. I don't have a prepared script, but I will say one thing. In listening to everything that you said, I kept hearing the sense of how many times, particularly for folks of our generation, that we were told, no, it can't change. It can't be that way. You can't do this. You will be alone. You will die alone. You will not make a change. I worked at P&G, as some of you know. That was the message to me, and God knows where the strength came from to wrangle with them. I wasn't the only gay person at Procter & Gamble, but the vast majority in those days were closeted. And when P&G finally came around to us, because they were selling already to us, which is what made the case, because it's a business, not a church. I know some of us worship at the temple of Procter, right? I admit I'm addicted to the holiday box. but the point is that all of a sudden, a bunch of folks I had no idea about were saying, oh, Michael, you're really great. Look what you did. And I don't know that I did it. But all these other gay and lesbian folks were in the workplace colluding with the oppressor. And because I wasn't a manager, I was $1 an hour higher. I was a technician, hourly employee. That's the guy that does the work, right? It's never the rich and the powerful doing the work. They were forced to do it because they were being boycotted by an AIDS activist group that found out that there was a problem with the Medicaid coverage for a particular drug that they were selling. They don't like publicity. You know this. It's a business, not a church. So I think back about all those no's, and I think how much sooner the change could have happened if more of us. Now, I'll admit I'm not rich in retirement, but at the end of the day, I know who I am. And that's worth a lot to me. And people say, how are you so confident? Because I said, everybody told me my entire damn life, you're not going to change anything. I was a second-generation Greek American. My parents, both sides, came over on the boat. My grandparents did. They were first generation. In the first grade, I was told that I would not be able to read or write English because they were convinced, you remember the cultural bias of the 50s, that you had a strange last name. Chanak is actually Chanak-Stevens, but we use Chanak just to keep things Anglo for them. And guess what? I ended up going to college, graduating, and having a degree or two. And yes, I think back, was it really that I was so different? What was it about that experience of differentness? And why was it so important in my life? Now I just accept it and I move on from it. So I'm not going to go on and on here, but I just really appreciate your personal testimony. I did not get to Cincinnati till '78, so I didn't get to go to the first march here, but I was there in spirit. And now my sister, Miss Phebe Beiser.
Oh, it's a plot. I think it's your job. Each one of us. I will put my piece of paper. Will you hold this just for a moment?
I'll do it.
No, just for a moment until I put the paper. Oh, no, I'm not going to be that. I just need to. That's okay. No, not that. Not that. I just want to keep myself on track. No, I actually was going to play I was told 5 minutes. I'm like, God, I can't say anything. And my timer that has chimed at the end, but I'm going to just do this and not time it. So anyway, I'm Phebe, born Karen Beiser, Hamilton, Ohio. Yeah, and I knew at 16, and thank God, this wasn't part of it, but since we're getting personal here, in Hamilton High School, Taft High School at the time. So thank God, well, I had a crush on the journalism teacher, and thank God I had a friend that must have sensed, there might be something called gay. There might really be gaydar or things like that, or maybe just intuition, because she said, you know what, I have a crush on the gym teacher. I thought, oh my God, thank God I found a comrade, because I did. I don't know if I knew that term then, but a friend, and we could be, open, honest with each other. So thank God for Barbara. And we're friends on Facebook, hey, so things can happen from back then. But the main reason about having the archives, it is lesbian. It is 501c3 lesbian, but our collection is wherever our other feet touch, so LGBTQ collection. And who knows where the initials will go like 5 years from now, just a collection. But the driving word for me, since I was 16 in 1956, in the 50s, some of you can imagine, maybe a few can remember, invisibility. I mean, sure, homosexuals were kind of known about, but like the word, how's that, Oscar Wilde, the word dare not speak its name. Invisibility, and I thought, by God, I do not want to be invisible. It is not fair. It's a basic human right. It is not fair. I'm not going to be invisible. So that was a driving force for me. So anyway, I will not be able to see. So I just thought, since there's so much, if you start in 1956, that I thought I would start with 1973, the first gay pride, and gay was the word then, pride in Cincinnati, because I was there and Vic was there too, though we didn't know each other at the time till later. Not too many more years later, a few more years. Anyway, so I'll start there. So first there was no acronym LGBTQ back then. It was just gay, and then gay and lesbian, and it kept growing. I came down from Miami University, Oxford, with a carload of gay people to what would become the first gay pride march and rally in Cincinnati, 1973. It was exciting to be among so many lesbian and gay people. I mean, there were two handfuls in Oxford in the early 70s. So to come to the big city, you can imagine. So it was very exciting, even though there were really only a few hundred back then. But it was taking a stand. And it did get some coverage in the Independent Eye, alternative paper. So then I moved to Cincinnati because Oxford was, I knew all the other 4 lesbians and 2 were in a couple. So thought, no, it's time I need to get out of here, grow up, go to the big city. So at the food co-op back then, I can remember real clear. I saw Virginia and Thrace. I thought, oh my God. And I had just met them briefly at a march. I had gone to Columbus, the big city, capital of Ohio. I had gone to Columbus to a gay march and rally. And these two were pretty obvious butchy socialist types, really. They were very political. And here they were, the Cincinnati Food Co-op. I thought, oh my God. So I've connected to Cincinnati. I don't have to always go out of town like Chicago or Columbus. So I found them. They said, yes, some of us are meeting. And so that's when, I was on a different track, not gay liberation, but because of the women I met, the lesbians I met, they had a group they called it Labris, and that's, shall we say, a tool or a weapon or a symbol, a ritual symbol that the Amazons, real or mythological, but Labris is a name from the Amazons. So I started going to Labris social events, and they had consciousness-raising groups. It was the 70s. Let's see, what was this? Like 72, 3, around then. Labras, and learned discussions about patriarchy. And in fact, two of the older, they were quite a bit older and had money saved. I mean, this was not going to happen for me. But the two reigning couples, their goal was to leave the patriarchy by moving to the land. It was a big thing, moving to the land rurally, and you can be more in charge of your life. But I kept thinking, I didn't say, because I was too young and shy. But I thought, well, wouldn't they need help? Barn raising, all that. Wouldn't you need help from neighbor farmers to do things, especially if you're rural and things will happen and you'll be stuck, But I didn't question. I thought, well, I don't have the money. Plus, I got a job at the public library, and I wanted to meet girls in the city. I mean, how was I going to find somebody on a rural farm? No way. This was not practical for someone in their 20s. But anyway, but they did. One thing I do remember, I know St. John's Unitarian Church gets a lot of praise and deserved praise and attention from the 70s and 80s for opening their space for lesbian dances and all kinds of things, events. But sometime in the early 70s, I don't know the year offhand, but Labras did bring the Berkeley Women's Music Collective. It was a lesbian band from Berkeley, California. They were touring. I thought, oh my God, there's a lesbian band, and they were political, and they were cute, and they were good musicians. They had everything. And it was at First Unitarian Church. So I remember that, a couple things early on. So somehow they had that connection. Anyway, so then I moved to Dayton for a few years for love, but when that ended, a little L love, I rented a big house with a handful of other lesbians. We kind of tried to share household, It wasn't exactly a commune, that came later. But we played Lavender Jane Loves Women by Alex Dobkin on vinyl, back when it started. And it was like the first lesbian record that was national. So then I met Victoria when she came up, as I remember, for a NOW conference, or probably Marie and some of you came up for a conference, and I would guess now back then, but I'm 73, so some details are starting to blur. But came up to Dayton, and anyway, so then I remember riding the bus to Cincinnati in the snow one time to be with Victoria. We were awfully cute, weren't we? Anyway, well, we still are, but in a different way, but in a more naive way. But then eventually I moved back to Cincinnati and joined the lesbian commune that Vic and some other, there were about 5 of us at a height, I think. And the one thing I wanted to say about the commune, kind of life in it's very 70s, hippie and, expression. I always say the L word is liberation, because at Miami we would march against the war, and the war at that time was Vietnam War and consciousness raising and all that. So the L word, besides lesbian, later was liberation. But before there was a Crazy Ladies bookstore, Labras actually started buying. The Labras women would buy some of the few lesbian books that were starting to come out. And when they left to move to the land, the house, sometimes we just called the house, the commune, inherited those books. And Marie, who we lost a couple years ago to death, these euphemisms, past, lost, she died. She was one of the few of us that had a car, a station wagon, and she would drive those books to a NOW conference or an event. Sorry, my back is to you, Scott. I love him dearly. We're a team. We talked in Hamilton.
I'm making little finger puppets.
Are you? He always does something like that, like a kid brother. Okay. Anyway, so women, but we had the books, kind of a roving bookstore at the house for a while, and women, I think it was all lesbians that came there to buy the books. So we were kind of an early, secretive bookstore there in Clifton, Victor Street at the end. Anyway, I'm almost done here. But of course, Pride was the big event of the year. Sometimes maybe the only event, though there'd be some small things. Those early Prides kind of blur together. But again, I'm 73 now. But one thing though, I never got over the stimulation of being with tons of gay people and now LGBTQ people. And I would note that their prides went from rowdy and in-your-face chants in the streets to a corporate presence, and thank God for donations from P&G, because the archives has gotten one. And finally, just a real mix of characters representing their own special issues. So you say variety, diversity, even there is no gay community, one gay community. LGBTQ and the alphabet continues. And let's start with S for Scott.
I'm just going to sit, and I don't have anything to read. I thought for 5 minutes I can put it all in my head, and it'll come out my mouth. Just briefly, my name's Scott Knox. I'm a lawyer in town, and I do, and historically have done a lot of LGBTQ legal issues. I did union side labor law before then, and before then was an industrial hygienist that did occupational disease issues. I've been fortunate. I was thinking when these guys were talking, because one of you were talking about what drove you. I think what drove me in everything really was the things that have always ticked me off are arrogance and bullies. And with LGBTQ issues, that is everywhere. So, and the other thing that's very fortunate is I'm a privileged person in that I could take the cases I wanted to take. I didn't work for a big firm that would say, no, you can't do that. So I'll give you an example. There were 2 women up in Butler County back in 2002 that went for a name change. They were raising their artificially inseminated, unknown donor, so it was their kid. And they wanted to change all their last names to the same name because they're a family and they want everybody to have the same last name. Big no-brainer should have been. The magistrate who I think had a personal issue with gay, wrote an 11-page decision to them denying their name change, calling them unnatural, and saying that they could pretend they're a family, but they're not really a family because they're 2 women, and 2 women can't be a family even if they're raising kids. So, and their testimony was beautiful. They were unrepresented, but they said, we want our kids to know that we both love them the same. What better reason for doing a name? If I had gone into that courtroom and said, I dreamed that my name was George 5 times, I would have got my name changed, but they have a solid, really good reason, and he abused them. So arrogance and bully. So guess whose buttons that hit? And it made me mad because he thought, I can do whatever I want to them because they don't have all the money. They're not going to spend $30,000 on a lawyer to appeal this, so I can treat them any way I want. And it felt great to say, I'm going to take it for free, so no, you can't. So I took it, I filed ethics charges against the judge because you're not allowed to be biased as a judge based on religion or sexual orientation. And he was both, and it was right in his decision. I took it up to the Ohio Supreme Court, and we won. And there was a transgender name change a month later that he also denied. By the way, he based it in his decision on divine edict. God's law says, now, I'm not a religious expert, but in my perusing of the Bible, I didn't even notice, like in the mean parts of Leviticus, a footnote saying lesbians can't have the same last name. I don't think it's parsed that fine in the Bible. Yeah, so it was fortunate to me that I got to represent them because I didn't have anyone telling me, no, you can't. And it seemed like such a simple issue, but years later, I got a call from a transgender person in a county I'd never heard of, a rural county in Ohio, and she said, thank you, and could you please thank your client, because I went to a judge here for a name change, and he said, ordinarily I wouldn't approve this, but there's that Supreme Court case, so I have to. So it's kind of the gift that keeps on giving. That's kind of background. It's been a long way from there. I was involved with the gay marriage cases with Al Gerhardstein, and as a matter of fact, opened up the first estate in Ohio where a man was recognized as the husband of another man. So that is worlds away from the type of cases we used to get. And it's really changed my legal world and the world for my clients, where they can protect their kids and protect their family much better than they used to be able to. I just wanted to end by saying that the two themes, because I thought with 5 minutes I don't have much time to go over history, but I can tell you what I've learned in all these years. The two biggest things I've learned are, one, there's a lot of division in communities between the activist fringe and the mainstream. And I've always been kind of involved in the mainstream groups like Stonewall Cincinnati and Equality Cincinnati, but I've always had really close friends in the activist fringe group, and they get dismissed a lot, but they're the reason that change happens. So, and it's the same thing with the housing issue. I've spent 12 years on the board of strategies to end homelessness, which is a wonderful group, but we're not an activist group. We use data we get HUD money, and then we target it where it will do the most good based on data, so that we're not wasting the scant homeless money. Josh Spring and the Homeless Coalition are the ones that really pushed this bill. And you know, City Council has talked for 20 years about doing something about homelessness, and it's always, well, after we help fund these multi-million-dollar condos, then we'll get around to it. And the intention was always there, but it never happened. And Josh and the Homeless Coalition pushed this, and if it doesn't pass, it has still moved the needle, because City Council knows we can't just sit on our hands anymore, because we don't want that to pass. We don't want to try to find $50,000 through taxes. So we need to start doing something so we can tell people, don't vote for that. We're already working on it. But it forced them to work on it. In the gay community, I was on the board of Stonewall when we were the only show in town, and we were getting kind of comfy, and we weren't pushing for everything that we should have because there was no competition. Gay Lesbian March activists, headed by a buddy of mine, Shane Cuhey, and Bob McNee, started up their own group, and they said, if you guys don't do something, we're going to. And the something was to get legal protections for city workers initially. So we did it. We good cop, bad cop them. We would go to City Council and say, we really need to do this because those people are crazy and they're going to march in front of your house. So you may want to do it this way before they're holding signs in front of your house. So absolutely the progress happened because of them. We get the win. Isn't Stonewall wonderful? Yeah, we were, but the other group, Gay Lesbian March Activists, goes out of existence because it looks like they never did anything. Well, yeah, they did, and it was the same thing with ACT UP. It's the same thing with the Homeless Coalition. So when I see activist groups now, and I want to dismiss them as being bomb throwers, I think they're forcing change. They're dragging the conversation over. The other theme, which is a brief one, and it was probably self-evident to a lot of people in the room, is every major problem that I see would be solved if we weren't hardwired to think about everything as us versus them. Exodus, when I heard the story, I thought that's us versus them. Everything that damages people in broad ways and we're hardwired the same way. We have to watch for it in ourselves, because if I'm driving through Warren County and I see a bumper sticker for Trump, I immediately have put that person in a box of who they are, and I could be entirely wrong. But we're tribal, and I think that we're evolutionarily wired to be tribal, and we have to watch it constantly, because people will believe anything about the other. With gay people, it was pedophilia. I grew up believing, I prayed every night that I wouldn't be gay, and fortunately, God totally ignored me. It's like, no. Stop that, Scott. But I believed back then that gay people were old and lonely, they grew up old and lonely, and they were pedophiles. That was everything I believed about. I used to have a recurring nightmare that I was turning into a monster and I couldn't help it. Well, where do you think that came from? And I think that's another reason why I got so involved, is that's child abuse, to let children believe that they're horrible. And you see it today with Gene Schmidt introducing legislation in Ohio that at third grade or less teachers are not allowed to teach anything about LGBTQ people. That's just extending this, where you say, you are so horrible we can't even talk about to young children. So anyway, off my soapbox, that's everything I have. But that's everything I've learned in 30 years.
You know, what's interesting is I wanted to say, number one, Alex Stopkin passed recently, past year or two, yeah. She actually came to town a number of times, a lesbian singer and songwriter, The Women in Your Life. And she came to WAIF when we used to have the gay radio show, Alternating Currents, and she was a great person. The picture, and of course, the eye, the independent eye from 73, the quote, gay march in Cincinnati. Turns out you had the newspaper. You knew about it. I didn't.
Knew about it. I didn't have it.
Okay, well, the weird thing is, do you know how I came across it? This is just history, I suppose. One of the people that worked at P&G, a retiree, said, oh, I wrote for the Independent Eye, and she sent me the thing. And so, of course, now it's in the public library. Yeah, it's just crazy. So I'm done ranting. Next.
I just wanted to say one thing. We put some flyers about different seminars that we have coming up that will be at the church here. And also the two that are coming up first are on the one single sheet, and then there's a little pamphlet with the whole year. But also there are some historical kind of cards that I put together to give away and kind of promote homosexuality. and also some rainbow sparkly disco ball earrings that you can help yourself to. They're back there by that, back there in the corner, you'll see. That's all, thanks.
I also had a thought. You're so right about the gay lesbian march activists and Shane Kehui and Todd Cam and Bob McNee. On the fringe of that, yeah. Dr. Bob McNee was at one time the chair of the UC Geography Department and then a prof for a long period of time. On our way to the National March in Washington on what's National Coming Out Day? What day is that? October 11th. The 11th. That was 1987, October 11th, because the next year is when they celebrated the first Coming Out Day. Anyway, I'm a kid from a small town of 28,000. My grandparents started the Greek Orthodox Church there in 1939, so I was raised in the church. And somehow or another, when I came to Cincinnati and we're talking about the influence of churches, St. John's Unitarian, I'd mention, of course, Church of Our Savior, which is where New Spirit MCC met. And through going at MCC, all the liberal UC kids and profs would come down on Sunday to go to the church service at 7 p.m. for Metropolitan Community Church. I meet Bob McNee. So on this trip to D.C., he said to me, talk about being naive, he says, you know, Michael, you're an activist. And I looked at him like, what are you talking about? I'm just who I am. And then I realized we're all, if we choose to be or acknowledge it, activists, and we all have that power. And to this day, I think about Bob. Remember the various controversies over the year in the old days about Burnett Woods and quote, quote, gays in the park. And I remember listening to Bob on the radio, WLW, giving them hell about that topic. And you know, I was so proud. And just to have a representative to speak, not just an ally, but somebody who was in our place to say, your reality is real. You count. You matter. This is nonsense. And so I always like to honor those people because I know if it weren't for them and that encouragement, it wouldn't be here. It's as simple as that.
I'll just share one short Bob McNee story. Vic and I went to one of our first talks. I don't know if you remember this, but we talked to probably a gay, or whatever term they used back then, group that met in the geography building, Swift Hall, I think, and Bob and his partner, Shane, were there. And at the end of our talk, like what we were saving and why we were saving all this literature and flyers and magazines and everything. And then, I think it was Shane, but one of them handed a $100 bill. Why? I remember the financial issues, who knows? Retired, you know. But one of them, I think Shane, it was probably a check, anyway, handed us $100 and said, "We will give you this if you promise to start a bank account." I mean, this was, well, and actually, we still are with Northside Bank and Trust. And I found out, doing some business with them, with the archives, it was 1989, the year, of course, that makes sense. So 1989, yeah, they gave us 100 and said, "Please do start a bank account," which was such great, speaking of advice, of course, but we needed that, because our heads and hearts were all over the place, but we needed some practical advice. Bob McNee.
You mentioned P&G's contribution to OLA that happened about 2 years ago, and that's kind of an odd dance because some of you know post-retirement, a CNN video or whatever was made about me and the efforts then, and then follow on with how the affinity group started. Well, the whole point is that the guy involved in that, Brent Miller, who is now one of the Out 100 from Out Magazine for 2023, he asked me one time what my volunteer activities were, and I told him about the Ohio Lesbian Archives, and he said to me, "Let me see what I can do." And he came back with a proposal to give them $5,000, give us $5,000, and more importantly, and this is just the oddness of what a full circle things come, the story of my life and experience then came about because Brent Miller, who is gay, knew that somehow or another their policy had changed, but no one knew how or why. Believe it or not, I had been gone, 14 years then from Proctor. So he called me up after snooping around, and I'm like, who is this guy? And he explains, and he said, "We need documentation." And I thought, all right, I've been holding, I was a bad Procter & Gamble employee. I actually copied the discrimination stuff that I found in the workplace and my files and everything. I had a stack of like 70 or 80 documents. He said, "We want to document this history. Do you mind? Or would you do it?" And I said, "So long as you're not going to prosecute me." So, exactly. So the long of it is, those records and the records that were from the affinity group called Gable, after they comb them for security reasons or product ideas, they're going to be given a copy. The Ohio Lesbian Archives is given money for some computers, and they're going to be given electronic copies of those records, of those events. And that's one of the most exciting things for me, to think that some actions we all have participated in here. And Scott was in one of the films, by the way, of course. We got to be got to be inclusive, right? Everybody seems to have had a piece of it, and that's the beauty of it.
I say, if people have some questions.
That's what I was going to say. Does anybody have any questions?
From the 1930s to the 1960s, there were a fairly significant of artists and people in the music field, lesbians who lived together. Cincinnati does not record them. Usually you have to find out through other national records.
What do
Do you have any kind of file on these, or
remembering is one of a very old, it was anonymous, oh, sorry. We did a special history, Cincinnati history issue of the newsletter Dinah, local newsletter Dinah, in the early, either 81 or 2. But someone found us 3 much older women to write up something, and they were anonymous 1, 2, and 3, and by now I'm sure they've passed. But one of them talked about meeting at, let's see, Little Jimsy's Playhouse or something. Maybe that was the name of the band. About some groups that came through town, and they were very popular, jazz mostly, and different bars. And they told what streets some of these places were on, but this was like 50s, so I don't go back further. There was, so we have evidence, some evidence. But 30s, you're saying 30s, wow.
Based in Cincinnati.
Wow.
Reminds me of those old lesbian softball games I've heard about many times. What was that in the 30s? There was a school teacher. Her name was Winsome Bacon. Winnie. She went by Winnie. I don't know if you knew Winnie. Oh, she was a trip. Oh, yeah. Winnie Bacon. She was one of the players, and I always thought that was fascinating that these corporations would sponsor these lesbian groups. I just love it.
Talk about it. They probably didn't talk about it. But any other questions, and then we'll let people go home or wherever you go.
Yeah, so I grew up in Cincinnati, and I remember in the early 90s when the sheriff was Simon Lease. But, this was a notoriously conservative city. He tried to shut down the Ensemble Theater for having a gay play and confiscated a gay Italian hardcore movie from the one gay bookstore downtown. So can you think, and now the scene, I went away for 24 years, came back, and the scene has just so shifted to where, we have a pride flag flying, at City Hall during Pride Month. So can you think of and you see watershed moments when that tide began to shift?
Sure, a lot of and you're absolutely right. I mean, look at the change now. We have a wonderful lesbian sheriff in place of Simon Lease. That's phenomenal. Charmaine McGuffey. I believe what really changed things is a couple of things. One, I think what changed things here and nationally were greater public acceptance of LGBTQ people, which came about through Ellen DeGeneres and Will and Grace, and getting into people's lives that activists couldn't get into those homes because they wouldn't have listened to us. But it's the us-them thing. Once people realize, and more people coming out, so they realize, oh, it's not gay people, it's my cousin Cheryl. So it's more personal. The other thing is activism. We were never a terribly conservative town, oddly. We had a couple of rich people that very well-funded conservative causes. Lindner and Farmer, and they funded conservative causes. But Jesse Jackson won the Democratic primary here when he ran. I mean, so I think what changed is a lot of activism and getting better people in office, which and going door to door. I'll tell you, that's the other thing. When we did our Article 12 was a anti-gay ordinance on our city charter that said that city council was disallowed from passing any law that would protect gay people from discrimination. To counter that, to get it off our city charter, an organization I was involved with, I was the legal director, called Citizens to Restore Fairness, got NGLTF, National Gay Lesbian Task Force, and built a coalition of groups all the way from the Chamber of Commerce to the AFL-CIO and many churches, and went door to door and talked to people and got it overturned. And what made a difference was going door to door and talking about, NGLTF trained us, mention gay. If you go through your whole talk and just say it's about discrimination, but you never mention that it's gay discrimination, they feel like you lied to them or misled them. So we went on people's doorsteps, a huge group of people, and talked about LGBTQ issues. And I think that contact, it was so effective that even though we tried to distinguish ourselves from gay marriage, because that was on the ballot the same time to pass a statewide ordinance or regulation saying that you couldn't be gay married, Hamilton County was the only county in which that failed. And I believe it's because of all the people that went door to door, and they felt the us-them thing. It broke down the us-them, which was really helpful. But yeah, you're right, it's changed entirely.
And a little known treat for you is that Procter & Gamble, of course, employed, who was the chair of Citizens to Restore Fairness? Gary Wright, the late Gary Wright. He was the company's demographer. It was unheard of in those days for Procter, of all people, to give somebody like a leave of absence to do a political campaign. Unheard of. And Gary came back and worked for them briefly, and then he passed, I don't know how many years ago now. It's been a bit, but P&G did honor him in the documentary films because there was some extant materials. Also, during the repeal, you know, those were the times of Dr. Laura, what was this, Schlesinger and all that all that horrible stuff. And P&G was being boycotted by these crazies. P&G's revenge, I gotta love this, you know, for P&G's an odd beast. You know, good old Mother Procter, you just don't know what side she's gonna come down on. She did two things I never thought I'd see. They sent out a letter internally encouraging employees to pass the measure to repeal Article 12 from, you know, years back. But most people don't realize they donated $10,000 to the campaign. Now, you know, that's really progressive when you think about it.